The first time Sandra stepped into Madame Tutu's compound, even the gate man couldn't help but look twice. It wasn't her voice that commanded attention. She was soft-spoken. It wasn't arrogance. She carried herself with humility. It was her form, full, curved, and shaped in ways that made older women whisper behind cupped hands. At 22, fresh from the village and desperate to work, Sandra stood before the cream-painted duplex that smelled of imported polish, unaware of how her life could soon unravel within these walls. Madame Tutu appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes sharp enough to slice through stone. "Don't touch anything. You are not told to touch," she commanded, her gaze traveling critically over Sandra's figure. "You are too curvy. These are the kind of girls that distract men. Keep your head down." Sandra nodded silently. She was accustomed to such remarks about her body. They followed her like shadows. Life in Madame Tutu's home came with unwritten rules. Sandra couldn't go upstairs, couldn't serve Philip directly, couldn't sit unless she was peeling something. The household operated around Madame's displeasure and her son Philip's obliviousness. Then there was Amanda, Philip's fiancée, light-skinned, tall, and fashionable, who saw Sandra and immediately marked her as a threat. "Don't even look at my man. This your village shape won't help you here." Sandra learned to wake before the house stirred, to move quietly through rooms where she wasn't welcome. She perfected the art of invisibility until Philip began to notice her. It started subtly, a lingering glance when she bent to sweep the balcony, eyes that followed the sway of her hip across the compound, small fabricated reasons to call her for water, just to watch her move. The more Sandra retreated from his attention, the more obsessed he became. One Friday night, after a celebration where wine flowed freely, Sandra heard a knock on her door. Philip stumbled in, reeking of alcohol, shirt half unbuttoned, eyes bloodshot with desire. "You know you drive me crazy, right?" he slurred, advancing closer. "Always tying this wrapper. You think I don't see? Please, sir, go back upstairs," Sandra pleaded, backing away. "Madame will kill me if she hears." "I don't care," he whispered, reaching for her wrapper. That night, Philip took what wasn't offered, and Sandra said nothing, because in that house her voice carried no weight. By morning, she was back to sweeping the front yard, boiling water for Madame Tutu's bath, arranging the breakfast table, moving through her duties with a bruised soul. Philip came downstairs, fresh and composed, cologne wafting around him like innocent armor. He walked past Sandra as though she were invisible, ignoring her trembling hands and red-rimmed eyes. 3 weeks later, the sickness began. At first, Sandra attributed it to stress and trauma. But when she vomited behind the generator house 2 mornings in a row, she knew her midnight trip to the local chemist confirmed it. 2 lines on the pregnancy test. She didn't cry, just stared blankly at the plastic stick that had sealed her fate. Sandra tried to hide her condition with baggy clothes and constant sips of water to quell the nausea. But Madame Tutu's eyes missed nothing. "You look sick," she confronted Sandra one morning after nearly fainting on the staircase. "Are you pregnant?" Sandra's silence was as the confirmation Madame Tutu needed. "It's Philip, isn't it?" When Sandra looked down, Tutu exploded. "You opened your useless legs for my son? In my house? Under my roof?" Sandra fell to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't plan it. I want you out of my house today." When confronted, Philip's defense crumbled to dust. "I was wrong. I didn't know what I was doing," he claimed weakly. "She's always bending anyhow, shaking her body up and down. She seduced me. You ignored Amanda, a whole Ashbo girl with 3 passports for a housemaid." Madame Tutu clapped her hands in disbelief. "You, the son of Chief Lu," looked around and said, "Yes, this is the womb that will carry my legacy." "I don't want her or the baby," Philip insisted coldly. By mid-afternoon, Sandra's small box of clothes sat by the gate. Madame Tutu thrust an envelope at her. "There is 40,000 inside. Use it to remove that thing you are carrying." Sandra walked for hours, feet burning, eyes swollen, clutching her box in one hand and the envelope in the other. At dawn, she paid 8,000 naira to a gateman for shelter in an uncompleted building, bare walls and cement floors. Her only refuge. Days blurred into weeks as Sandra scrubbed market stalls for pittance, helped food vendors balance trays for elderly women, all for a few naira to survive. Nights found her coiled on cold cement, her growing belly a reminder of Philip's crime and her uncertain future. She remembered her village friend Amaka, who had bled to death during an abortion, and knew she couldn't take that path. What if this baby grew up to be a governor? She whispered to herself. What if this pregnancy was the beginning of a better life? Fate intervened one sweltering afternoon when Sandra, 9 months pregnant and sweating profusely, helped an onion seller's customer carry 5 stacks of food to her car. The woman, elegantly dressed in designer clothing and gold earrings, was Madame Michi, who pressed 10,000 naira into Sandra's hand and invited her to her home. Madame Michi listened without interruption as Sandra shared her story. With quiet dignity, she told Sandra about her foundation for abandoned pregnant women and young mothers. Childless herself, Madame Michi had channeled her pain into uplifting others. She offered Sandra shelter, medical care, and support. No conditions, no shame. Sandra delivered a healthy baby boy at a private clinic funded by the foundation. She named him Komsi, knowing his features: the nose, the dimples, the mouth, all belonging to Philip. In the months that followed, Sandra stayed at one of the foundation's apartments, carrying Kamsi on her back as she trained at a pastry and grill center. Madam Mishi personally taught her to market her business online, taking good photographs, writing simple captions, posting on social media. 5 years transformed Sandra from a timid housemaid into a confident entrepreneur. Comsy Grills and Pastry now employed 3 assistants and 2 delivery boys, with an Instagram page showcasing elegant party setups. Kamsi had grown into a talkative, charming boy who bore an unmistakable resemblance to his father. Fate's wheel turned again when Sandra received a catering order for an emergency party celebrating 4 years of love between Philip and Amanda. The moment she entered the venue, her stomach clenched at the banner bearing their names. She focused on her work, ignoring the whispers about Comsey's striking resemblance to Philip. When Philip descended the stairs and froze at the sight of Sandra and the boy, who mirrored his face, Amanda followed his gaze and understood immediately who he is. She demanded. Sandra remained composed. I believe the resemblance answers your question. That is impossible. He is 5 years old. Sandra stated flatly. Do the math. Amanda turned on her husband, who couldn't bear his eyes from the child. Philip, say something. But words failed him as he stared at his son's face, the same one in his childhood photographs. Sandra completed her work professionally and left without drama. But Philip couldn't forget. Days later, he traced her business address and arrived at her shop, where Kamsi sat in his school uniform counting cupcakes. He looks just like me, Philip said softly. Sandra's voice remained steady. I wonder what the almighty Madam Tutu has to say now. Now that the child she tried to kill is alive, breathing and walking around with your face. She is dead, he replied. Stroke 2 years ago. After a pause, Philip continued. My marriage is complicated. Amanda and I haven't had children. The pressure is eating us. Sandra's eyes held years of hardship. I had this child alone with no money in an uncompleted building while you looked away and lived your life. Philip, he simply looked at Kamsi, then back at her. I just want to be in his life, if you will allow me. Sandra turned away silently, continuing to arrange her shelves, leaving the question of forgiveness hanging between them, as heavy as the past they shared and as uncertain as the future that awaited her decision. Then the big puzzle is, if you were Sandra, what will be your response? Let me know in the comments.